A child's laughter from 4,000 years ago is still echoing. It is a sound that connects us directly to the world's oldest playgrounds, hidden within lost civilizations. This journey uncovers the astonishing secrets of ancient childhood and imagination, revealing how our ancestors nurtured creativity through play. We will explore archaeological evidence from miniature toys to massive game courts, piecing together the daily lives of history's youngest inhabitants. You will gain a completely new perspective on human history, one seen not through kings and battles, but through the eyes of children whose games shaped the future. How did a simple clay cart from a silent city teach a child about their world? What profound meaning was hidden inside a board game meant for the afterlife? By the end, you will understand the invisible thread connecting every child across time. What part of your own childhood would an archaeologist find 1,000 years from now? The playground of an ancient child was not a fenced-off area with brightly colored equipment. It was the entire bustling world around them. Think of a city like Mohenjo-Daro, its baked brick streets humming with life. A child's play space could be the very spot where a potter shaped clay, the dusty ground beside a granary, or the shallow edge of a public well. Play was not a scheduled activity but a constant, organic part of existing. A broken piece of pottery became a toy boat for a puddle. A smooth, flat stone transformed into a gaming piece. The rhythm of daily life provided the soundtrack and the stage. This is why archaeologists often find evidence of play in the most unexpected places, not in dedicated parks. The concept of a playground was a state of mind, a way of seeing possibility in the ordinary. A child in ancient Egypt might have used the cool, polished floor of a temple courtyard as a surface for a game of senet, their laughter echoing off columns inscribed with hieroglyphs. In that moment, the sacred space became a personal arena of challenge and fun. This fluid boundary between work, worship, and play reveals something profound about these societies. They understood that imagination was not something to be compartmentalized, but a force that wove itself through every aspect of life, turning a riverbank into a pirate's cove and a village square into a mythical kingdom. So how do we find these invisible playgrounds? We must learn to look for the echoes of imagination in the objects left behind. These whispers from the past often begin with the smallest of objects. A miniature clay cart, no larger than your palm, tells a story far grander than its size suggests. It was not merely a trinket but a tool for a child to understand their world. By pushing that tiny cart across a dirt floor, a child in ancient Mesopotamia was not just playing. They were rehearsing for adulthood, mimicking the vital trade routes their family depended on. The careful craftsmanship of these toys is equally revealing. A wooden doll with articulated limbs from Egypt, or a meticulously painted clay animal from the Indus Valley, shows that adults invested time and skill into creating objects for play. This suggests a cultural recognition of childhood itself as a valuable phase of life, worthy of such dedicated artifacts. We can almost see a parent handing that doll to a child, a simple act of love that transcends 4,000 years. But the evidence is not limited to crafted toys. Sometimes the most profound clues are found in the wear and tear on the world itself. A series of shallow holes drilled into a stone floor in a Roman villa might be the remains of a forgotten board game. A patch of stone steps, worn smooth and dipped in the center by generations of small feet running up and down, silently marks a favorite play area. Even the chemical residue inside a tiny, chipped pottery cup can hint at a child's pretend feast. These subtle modifications to the environment are the archaeological equivalent of a child's laughter echoing off ancient walls. They are the physical proof of life and movement, of countless hours spent in the pure, focused joy of play. When we piece these fragments together, the mosaic that emerges is not one of silent, empty ruins, but of vibrant, noisy spaces filled with the energy of youth. Each tiny artifact and every worn stone is a direct challenge to the silence of the past, urging us to listen more closely to the small details we so often overlook. The silent, meticulously planned cities of the Indus Valley hold a secret language spoken not in words, but in clay. In the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, amidst the grid-like streets and advanced drainage systems, archaeologists have unearthed a stunning collection of terracotta toys that whisper directly to us about childhood. These are not crude lumps of clay. They are sophisticated artifacts that reveal a society deeply invested in its youngest members. Miniature carts with solid, movable wheels show a clear fascination with movement and transport. A child could push this tiny vehicle across a floor, mimicking the carts that carried goods through the bustling city streets, learning about commerce and mechanics through their fingertips. Even more evocative are the small whistles shaped like birds. Blow into one, and after 4,000 years, it would still produce a sharp, clear sound. This simple object connects us to a moment of pure joy and mimicry, a child imitating the birds they heard every day, blending play with an early exploration of music and sound. Then there are the animal figurines, especially bulls. These were likely cherished toys, but they also subtly connected a child to the agricultural and spiritual world around them. The bull was a powerful symbol in Indus culture, and through this small clay figure, a child learned about the animals that were central to survival and religion. The evidence for play extends even further with the discovery of dice and carefully shaped gaming pieces made from pottery and stone. This tells us that board games were a common pastime, a way for families and friends to gather and compete. The sheer prevalence of these objects found in the context of ordinary homes shows that play was not an afterthought. It was a valued and fully integrated part of daily life. Here is a civilization whose written script we cannot read, whose grandest rituals remain a mystery, and yet we know they cherished their children's creativity. These toys are their true voice, a vibrant declaration that even in one of the world's first great cities, the laughter and imagination of a child were considered essential. This tangible connection to Indus Valley childhood makes the mystery of another ancient culture's playful pursuits even more compelling. That same thread of imagination weaves its way into the sands of ancient Egypt, where a toy was far more than a simple plaything. In this civilization, the objects of childhood were often crafted with an eternal purpose. Elaborate dolls found resting in tombs were companions for the afterlife. Made of wood and linen, with hair of stringed beads and articulated limbs that could be posed, these figures were not just for a few years of amusement. They were meant for an eternity of companionship, a profound statement about the value placed on a child's joy, even in the face of death. The blurring of play and ritual extended to the games everyone enjoyed. Balls crafted from leather or tightly wound papyrus, stuffed with reeds, were used in lively games. Murals depict girls juggling multiple balls with impressive skill, capturing a moment of pure, physical fun that feels instantly familiar. Yet it is the board games that reveal the deepest connection between daily life and spiritual belief. A game like Senet, played on a grid of 30 squares, was a popular pastime in every home. But its meaning ran far deeper. Egyptians believed the board represented the soul's perilous journey through the Duat, the underworld. Moving your pieces was a symbolic act, a rehearsal for the ultimate voyage. A child learning the rules of Zen, it was simultaneously learning the tenets of their culture's most sacred beliefs. This fusion reached a peak of craftsmanship with mechanical toys. A wooden statue of a cat, its lower jaw cleverly designed to open and close when a string was pulled, shows a breathtaking dedication to amusement. Someone spent hours carving and engineering that simple marvel just to delight a child. This was a society that refused to separate the spiritual from the playful. They understood that a child's imagination was not a trivial spark, but a sacred flame, so vital it was packed alongside grave goods to illuminate the darkness of the afterlife. The Egyptian child, then, played in the shadow of the gods, their games a direct preparation for an eternal destiny. The artistic soul of Minoan Crete reveals a civilization that wove play directly into its vibrant culture. On the sun-drenched island, the world itself was a canvas for youthful energy. The sprawling, labyrinthine palace of Knossos, with its open courtyards and countless stairways, was not just a royal residence. It was a colossal playground. Children could have darted through its pillared halls, their footsteps echoing in a game of chase, or hidden in its many chambers, transforming the architecture of power into a setting for pure imagination. This physical freedom was mirrored in their art. Frescoes depict young boys boxing and wrestling, capturing moments of organized, energetic play. These were not just images of sport. They were snapshots of a society that celebrated physical agility and courage, values children would naturally emulate in their own games. The most famous fresco, of course, is the bull leaping ritual. While this was a dangerous and likely sacred act performed by trained acrobats, its very presence on the walls speaks to a cultural admiration for daring and grace. It is easy to envision children in a dusty courtyard, pretending to vault over one another, mimicking the powerful movements of the revered bull, their play blending awe with imitation. Beyond physical games, there is evidence of a quieter creativity. Archaeologists have found pottery fragments with simple, charming sketches that are unmistakably the work of a child's hand. This suggests that artistic expression was not solely for master craftsmen. The act of drawing was encouraged, a way for a young mind to make its mark on the world. The widespread lack of fortified walls around Minoan towns further completes this picture. It implies a sense of security that granted children a rare freedom to roam and explore the boundaries of their world, from the seashore to the hillsides. In Minoan Crete, art, architecture, and daily life converge to create an environment where a child's body and mind could play, develop, and flourish without fear. This secure and artistically rich environment stands in quiet contrast to the next chapter of our story, where play took on a far more structured and formal role in preparing for a life of duty. In the Fertile Crescent between two great rivers, a different philosophy of childhood was taking root. Mesopotamian society was one of the world's first to be built on strict hierarchy and specialized labor, and this structure deeply influenced how a child played. Their toys were not just for amusement, they were tiny tools for building a future citizen. A miniature chariot, expertly crafted from copper, was more than a trinket. It was a physical lesson for a boy being groomed for leadership or battle, familiarizing his hands with the instruments of power and war. Similarly, a simple clay doll was a subtle introduction to the nurturing roles a girl would be expected to fulfill. Even a lumpy, uneven pottery bowl, clearly the work of a child's first attempt on a wheel, reveals a society where play and vocational training were seamlessly intertwined. The line between a game and a lesson was beautifully, intentionally blurred. This educational purpose reached its peak in the scribble schools, the adabas. Here, elite children underwent the rigorous process of learning cuneiform. While demanding, this was also a form of disciplined play. A student would spend hours pressing a stylus into a soft clay tablet, forming wedges and lines. The very act was a tactile, almost meditative game of creating order from a formless lump. Some of these surviving tablets contain the earliest known riddles, proving that even in this strict environment, the spark of playful curiosity was encouraged. The most widespread evidence of Mesopotamian fun, however, comes from the game board. The royal game of with its stunning lapis lazuli and shell inlays, was a beloved pastime across all classes. Families and friends would have gathered around this board, rolling tetrahedral dice and racing their pieces, their shouts and laughter filling a courtyard. This was not just a game of chance, it was a social ritual, a moment of shared strategy and excitement that cut across the rigid lines of daily life. In Mesopotamia, a child's world was a rehearsal for the complex roles of an adult. But it was a rehearsal filled with the genuine joy of rolling dice, solving riddles, and shaping destiny, one small clay token at a time. This practical approach to play makes the next discovery all the more astonishing, where we find a culture that built playgrounds not for children, but for the gods themselves. The philosophy of a civilization shapes its playgrounds as much as its politics. In ancient Greece, the concept of play was a matter of intense, almost philosophical debate, and it took two strikingly different forms. In the intellectual heart of Athens, childhood was a preparation for a life of cultured citizenship. A boy's education balanced music, poetry, and physical grace. His play mirrored this ideal. A simple terracotta yo-yo spinning up and down on its string was not just a distraction, it was a lesson in rhythm and coordination. The clatter of knuckle bones, small animal ankle bones used like dice in a game of chance, taught quick counting and friendly competition. A boy rolling a bronze hoop through the dusty streets, steering it with a metal rod, was developing the physical agility and control prized in the gymnasium. The vibrant scenes painted on Greek pottery bring this world to life. We see girls playing with their pet geese and young boys engaging in mock battles with wooden swords. This was play with a clear purpose, designed to cultivate a harmonious balance of mind and body. Yet this Athenian ideal of balanced development stands in stark contrast to the world of Sparta, where the state's survival was the only goal. The agoge, the infamous Spartan upbringing, was a brutal system of state control. But even here, play was not eliminated. It was weaponized. Team games were not for fun. They were for forging endurance and unbreakable group loyalty. A simple ball game became a test of pain tolerance and strategic thinking. Physical competitions were miniature battles designed to weed out weakness and instill a fierce competitive spirit. Play in this context was a survival drill disguised as recreation. The Greek philosopher Plato, perhaps thinking of these very contrasts, wrote extensively on the importance of play in early education. He argued that the games children play are not trivial. They are fundamental to shaping the moral character of the soul, setting it on a path toward either justice or tyranny. For all Greeks, this was the ultimate purpose of play. It was the core of paideia, the comprehensive process of molding a human being into a virtuous and effective citizen of the city-state. A child's imagination was not a wild flame to be left untamed, but a vital force to be carefully channeled toward civic duty. This conscious shaping of childhood through games reveals a profound understanding of play's power, a power that would soon be harnessed on a truly monumental scale by the architects of an empire. A child pushing a tiny clay cart was doing more than playing. They were learning the rhythm of trade that fed their city. This instinct to imitate the adult world was the engine of ancient education, a living curriculum written not on tablets but in the sand and dirt of everyday life. In a Neolithic village, a child constructing a miniature hut from twigs and mud was not just passing the time. They were internalizing the fundamental architectural principles of their community, understanding how to layer materials for stability and how to shape a shelter against the wind and rain. Their game was a direct, hands-on rehearsal for the vital task of building a home. The Roman world, saturated with military might and public spectacle, was mirrored perfectly in its children's play. Small terracotta figurines of legionaries and gladiators became the actors in epic dramas staged on a dusty floor. A child would maneuver these tiny combatants, recreating the battles they heard about and the games they witnessed in the arena. In that moment, they were absorbing the values of courage, discipline, and the stark realities of their empire's power structure. Across nearly every culture, the universal presence of dolls speaks to this deep-seated need for mimicry. A little girl in ancient Greece or Egypt, cradling a wooden or rag doll, was practicing the nurturing gestures of her mother. She was learning empathy and care, her play a gentle preparation for the responsibilities of family life. This imitation extended directly into the world of work. Archaeologists have uncovered tiny, functional looms, miniature pottery wheels that actually spun, and scaled-down versions of blacksmithing tools. These were not mere models, they were real, child-sized workshops. A child could sit at a small loom and, through trial and error, begin to understand the complex over and under pattern of weaving. They could place a lump of clay on a miniature wheel and feel the struggle to center it, learning the foundational skills of a potter through their fingertips. There were no formal classrooms for these essential crafts. The knowledge was transmitted through the joyful, repetitive act of pretend. Every society depends on its children to carry its culture forward, and these ancient civilizations unlocked the most natural method possible. They harnessed the boundless energy of imagination, turning play into the most effective and enduring textbook ever created. A simple lump of clay was a universe of possibility in a child's hands. The raw materials of ancient play were humble, yet they became the very foundation of entire worlds. Clay was the most common canvas for imagination, easily shaped when wet and hardened by the sun or a kiln into a permanent toy. A child could press their thumbs into its cool, pliable surface, forming a miniature animal, a cart with solid wheels, or a whistle that still carries a ghost of a note after thousands of years. Wood was another essential, carved and smoothed into dolls with moving limbs, spinning tops that danced with a flick of the wrist, and pull-along creatures that clattered across stone floors. Stone, more difficult to shape, was patiently worked into perfectly round marbles or polished gaming pieces, their weight and coolness solid in a small palm. But not every toy required crafting. The natural world offered a ready-made treasure chest of playthings. A smooth, flat pebble could be a token in a game. A colorful seashell became a precious jewel in a pretend kingdom. The knucklebones of sheep or goats were gathered not for food, but for a game of toss and catch, their irregular shapes making each throw a lesson in chance and dexterity. For the children of elites, materials shifted from the common to the luxurious. A doll might be crafted from gleaming ivory, or a gaming piece from vibrant Egyptian faience, its blue-green glaze catching the light. A miniature chariot could be cast in solid bronze, a heavy, expensive echo of the real vehicles of power. Yet, regardless of the material's cost, the true magic happened in the mind of the child. The simplicity of a rag doll or a clay ball demanded more from imagination, not less. Without predefined sounds or flashing lights, the child had to supply the voice, the story, the galloping hooves, and the roaring crowd. This resourcefulness points to a profound and universal truth. The value of a toy was never in the substance it was made from, but in the invisible world of story and role play it inspired. We are fortunate that clay and stone are so durable, for they have carried the physical proof of this imaginative spark across the millennia, waiting for us to rediscover it. A simple board game scratched into a stone floor was a portal to the cosmos. Across the ancient world, from the banks of the Nile to the highlands of Mexico, games of strategy and chance were not idle distractions. They were profound instruments of culture, woven into the very fabric of spiritual belief and daily life. In Egypt, the game of Senet was a spiritual rehearsal. Its 30 squares were not just spaces to move a piece. They represented the 30 stages of the soul's perilous journey through the Juwat, the underworld. To play was to navigate a symbolic path of trials and tribulations, a direct interaction with the divine forces that governed life and death. A family gathered around a Senet board was not merely competing. They were participating in a ritual, their rolls of the dice a form of divination, seeking the favor of the gods for a safe passage into the afterlife. This spiritual weight was mirrored in distant Mesoamerica with the game of patoli, played on a cross-shaped board that mirrored the 4 cardinal directions. The game was a dynamic representation of the universe. The movement of beans used as dice and colored stones as pieces reenacted the eternal struggle between day and night, order and chaos. For the Aztecs, patoli was so deeply sacred that people would often wager their own freedom on the outcome, believing the gods themselves were guiding the toss. The game was a high-stakes drama where a player could win everything or lose it all, their fate decided by a roll that echoed the unpredictable whims of the cosmos. Beyond the spiritual arena, these games were masterclasses in cognitive development. The royal game of with its winding path of 20 squares, was a brilliant teacher of strategy and probability. A player had to constantly calculate risks, plan several moves ahead, and adapt to the unpredictable results of the tetrahedral dice. It trained the mind in logical thinking and foresight, skills essential for a merchant, a general, or a ruler. Socially, the game board was a powerful equalizer. A beautifully inlaid board made of lapis lazuli and shell might sit in a royal palace, while a simple version scratched into a paving stone served the common people in a public square. Yet the rules were the same. Across this social divide, people of all ages and classes could gather, their shared focus on the game creating a temporary community bound by the thrill of competition and the universal language of play. The intricate beauty of the boards and pieces, often crafted from precious materials, shows that these were objects of reverence and art. They were physical manifestations of a civilization's deepest beliefs about fate, order, and the human journey. When we look at an ancient game board, we are not just seeing a pastime. We are staring into a philosophical blueprint, a set of rules for the universe that fit neatly inside a wooden box. The bustling playgrounds of the ancient world were far from silent. Beyond the visual clues of toys and games, there existed a vibrant soundscape, a symphony of play that echoed through city streets and village squares. We often forget this auditory dimension, but archaeologists have unearthed its instruments. Among the most common finds are terracotta rattles, carefully shaped like pomegranates or small birds, their hollow bodies filled with tiny pebbles or seeds. A parent would have shaken one to soothe a fussy infant, the gentle, percussive sound a universal language of comfort. For an older child, that same rattle became a tool of rhythm, shaken in time with running feet or the chanting of a game. Then there are the whistles and ocarinas, painstakingly shaped from clay or carved from bone. Blowing into one of these produced a sharp, clear note. A child could mimic the call of a sparrow, signal to a friend across a courtyard, or simply experiment with creating a sequence of sounds, their breath-giving voice to a simple melody. While the skin and wood of drums have long since decayed, we know they were present from art and literature, their deep, resonant beats providing the pulse for both dance and ceremony. The most pervasive instrument of all, however, was the human voice. We can only guess at the words, but we know that singing games, rhythmic chants, and counting rhymes were a staple of childhood. These sonic traditions, passed orally from one generation of children to the next, formed an invisible thread of culture. This world of sound was not merely for fun. It was a fundamental form of learning. Shaking a rattle taught an infant about cause and effect. Blowing a whistle developed fine motor control and lung capacity. Keeping a steady beat with a clapping game honed coordination and a sense of timing. Through these playful noises, children were unconsciously developing the auditory skills and rhythmic sense that were essential for their future roles. In a world where music was integral to every harvest festival, every funeral, and every prayer to the gods, a child's first musical experiences were not trivial. They were the earliest lessons in a language that would one day connect them to their entire community and to the divine. The air around an ancient child was alive with the music of their own making, a lost soundtrack to the greatest game of all, growing up. The line between a sacred rite and a child's game was often invisible. In countless ancient societies, the most profound spiritual ceremonies were not hidden away from the young. They were openly observed, and their forms were eagerly absorbed into the world of play. A child in Mesoamerica did not just watch the solemn, life or death ball game played in the grand court. They likely had their own small, rubber ball, and they would have mimicked the hip and knee movements of the revered athletes, turning a ritual that could decide fates into a lively game in the village square. This imitation was a powerful form of learning, demystifying the terrifying stakes of the adult world by wrapping them in the comfortable cloak of a familiar pastime. In ancient Greece, this fusion was even more explicit. Young girls in Broron participated in the Archaeologia, a rite of passage where they dressed in saffron robes and imitated the movements of bears. This was not pure play, nor was it a somber, silent ritual. It was a vibrant performance that blended myth, religious duty, and the physical, playful energy of childhood. They were acting out the story of a goddess appeased, their bodies becoming the narrative. Archaeologists have found further evidence in the smallest of artifacts. Miniature terracotta altars and tiny ritual vessels perfect for a child's hands have been uncovered in domestic spaces. These were not official temple objects. They were toys. With them, children could stage their own solemn processions, pour imaginary libations of water, and offer pretend sacrifices to the gods. They were learning the precise steps and gestures of their culture's most important ceremonies, not through tedious memorization, but through the joyful, repetitive act of pretend. This process of sacred play served a deep psychological and cultural purpose. It allowed a child to touch the divine without fear, to interact with powerful forces in a safe, controlled environment of their own making. The complex theology of their civilization was not a distant, abstract set of rules. It was something they had practiced, something they had felt in their muscles and enacted in their games. These traditions became more than just lessons. They became a part of the child's very being, a spiritual inheritance woven directly into the fabric of their imagination, ensuring that the sacred would never feel separate from the world they lived and played in every single day. A child's first lessons in who they were meant to be often came not from a lecture but from a toy. The miniature objects placed in their hands or buried with them tell a clear, poignant story of divergent paths. For a boy in ancient Mesopotamia, a copper figurine of a warrior was a heavy, serious promise. It was a physical anchor to a future of leadership or combat, its weight in his palm a constant reminder of the strength and courage he would need to embody. In his games, he would maneuver tiny chariots across imaginary battlefields, his play a direct rehearsal for the protection of his city and the execution of its wars. For a girl, a carefully crafted doll was a different kind of lesson. Cradling that wooden or cloth figure, she practiced the gestures of motherhood and care, her play quietly reinforcing the nurturing role she was expected to fulfill. This division is starkly visible in the archaeological record. Excavations of children's graves repeatedly show this pattern. A boy might be buried with a small, functional axe or a set of gaming pieces meant for a strategy game, while a girl would be accompanied by a doll, tiny pottery vessels, or a miniature loom. These were not random gifts for the afterlife. They were symbolic toolkits, ensuring the child could continue to perform their culturally assigned role for all eternity. Yet this rigid separation had its fascinating exceptions. In Sparta, the societal need for strong mothers to bear warrior sons meant that girls participated in rigorous athletic training. They ran, wrestled, and threw the javelin alongside boys, their play and physical education designed to forge robust bodies. Their toys and games would have reflected this unique status, blending elements of physical competition with the more common domestic symbols. Despite these divides, certain forms of play created a common ground. The shared excitement of a board game like Senet or the royal game of transcended gender. A knucklebone toss or a lively game with a leather ball in an Egyptian courtyard was fun for everyone, a universal language of chance and physical skill that offered a temporary respite from the world's expectations. This entire system reveals a profound ancient truth. Play was the most powerful and subtle form of socialization. Through the daily, joyful act of pretending to be an adult, a child internalized their identity and their place within a vast, complex social machine. They were not just playing house or playing war. They were practicing with every gesture and every imagined scenario the very lives they were destined to live, their childhood imagination the gentle but firm hand that shaped them for their future. The laughter of children was not a universal privilege in the ancient world. For every child rolling a bronze hoop through a sunlit Athenian street, countless others knew a childhood defined not by play but by toil. The life of an enslaved child in Rome or a peasant's son in Mesopotamia was one of immediate and unrelenting labor. From the moment they could walk, they were given small, vital tasks. They might spend their days scaring birds from a newly sown field, minding younger siblings, fetching water from a distant well, or assisting a parent in a workshop, their small hands grinding grain or sorting scraps of leather. In fiercely militaristic states like Sparta, the concept of a carefree boyhood was systematically dismantled. A boy was thrust into the agoge training system at the age of 7. His life instantly transformed into a relentless drill of endurance, discipline, and survival. His play was weaponized, his games a direct preparation for a short, brutal life in the phalanx. The archaeological record itself tells a skewed story. The beautiful wooden dolls, the intricate board games, and the bronze chariots we find so easily were the possessions of the elite. The toys of the poor, crafted from perishable sticks, knotted rags, or a simple lump of mud, have returned to the earth, leaving little trace for us to uncover. Yet even within these constraints, the human capacity for imagination refused to be extinguished. A child tending goats on a hillside could easily turn a stray branch into a mighty sword, defending their flock from imaginary beasts. A handful of pebbles became a flock of sheep to be corralled, and a patch of dirt was a canvas for stories drawn with a finger. This is the most profound and heartbreaking aspect of ancient childhood. The spark of play was not a luxury afforded by wealth or status. It was a resilient, innate fire that flickered even in the darkest of circumstances, a quiet rebellion against a world that demanded they grow up far too soon. The story of ancient play is a global one, its echoes found in every corner of the world, far beyond the Mediterranean, across the vast oceans and continents. Children's imaginations were flourishing in astonishingly diverse ways. In the steamy jungles of Mesoamerica, the technology of fun was itself a marvel. The rubber ball, bouncing with a life unlike any stone or wood, was central to the sacred ball game. While the adult version was a deadly ritual, children certainly played with smaller, less lethal versions, their laughter mingling with the distinctive thud of rubber on packed earth as they mimicked the athletes they revered. The Maya left us further proof in their intricate ceramic figurines, which often captured children in moments of daily life and playful interaction, freezing their youthful energy in fired clay for eternity. Across the Pacific, in Han Dynasty China, a child's toys mirrored the rhythms of an agrarian empire. Miniature models of houses, farms, and sturdy pottery wheels were common finds. These were not just charming replicas, they were a tangible curriculum, teaching a child the foundational elements of their society through their fingertips. Even the kite, a brilliant Chinese invention first used for military signaling, could not have long remained a purely practical tool. We can easily envision a child's wonder as they first guided a colorful silk kite on a bamboo frame through the air, transforming a tool of war into a source of pure, soaring delight. In North America, indigenous cultures wove play directly into the fabric of survival. Dolls were lovingly crafted from corn husks, connecting a child to the land that sustained them. Games were often subtle training. A spear-throwing contest was not merely a competition. It was a vital lesson in accuracy and strength, honing the skills necessary for a successful hunt. And in the frozen north, the Inuit developed a beautiful and intricate form of play with string. The complex patterns of cat's cradle were more than a simple pastime. They were a test of dexterity and a dynamic way to tell the stories of their people, their fingers weaving narratives as intricate as the strings themselves. This breathtaking global view makes one thing perfectly clear. The materials and the specific games changed with every forest, every desert, and every river valley. But the core impulses remained a universal human constant. Whether a child was molding a clay cart in Mesopotamia, kicking a rubber ball in Mesoamerica, or flying a kite in China, they were all speaking the same native language of imagination. The grandest stories of a civilization were not confined to temples or scrolls. They were the very air that children breathed, a shared imaginative landscape that transformed their games into epic dramas. A Greek child, armed with nothing but a stick, could become the mighty Heracles, battling a many-headed hydra in the form of a gnarled olive tree. Their playground was a stage for the entire pantheon, where the cunning of Odysseus was tested in a game of hide and seek, and the flight of Icarus was reenacted from a low wall. In Egypt, the cosmic struggle between the god Horus and his treacherous uncle Set was not a distant myth. It was a rivalry played out in the dust, with children choosing sides and acting out the divine conflict, their games giving tangible form to the forces of order and chaos that governed their universe. For a Viking child, the frosty tales of Norse mythology provided a cast of unforgettable characters. The mighty Thor, with his magical hammer, was a favorite role. His battles against giants and serpents mimicked with wooden swords and roaring shouts that echoed the thunder he commanded. These stories did more than just entertain. They explained why the sun crossed the sky, why storms raged, and what virtues were worth dying for. By physically acting out these myths, children were doing something profound. They were internalizing their culture's worldview, its moral codes, and its history, not through passive listening but through active, joyful embodiment. A simple game of tag could become a lesson in the importance of bravery, while a dramatic reenactment of a hero's journey taught resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. This was how a culture ensured its soul survived, the collective memory of a people. Its deepest fears and highest aspirations was not written down in a book for children to study. It was woven into the fabric of their play, passed from one generation to the next in a living, breathing chain of imagination that made gods and heroes their constant companions. That innate human drive to play eventually demanded its own architecture. Across the ancient world, we begin to see a shift from purely organic play spaces to environments deliberately designed for physical and social development. In ancient Greece, this concept reached its zenith with the palaestra. This was not merely an open field. It was a formal, square complex, often colonnaded, built around a central courtyard of sand or earth. Here, young men and boys gathered to train in wrestling, boxing, and the long jump. The air would have been thick with the smell of olive oil and dust, filled with the sounds of grunting effort, shouted instruction, and the slapping of bodies on the ground. The palaestra was a school for the body, but it was also a crucial social hub where friendships were forged, and the ideals of citizen soldiers were physically hammered into shape. On an even grander scale was the Roman Circus Maximus. While its primary purpose was the thunderous spectacle of chariot racing, this massive valley between two hills was a city's playground. On non-race days, its vast central space would have been open to the public. Ordinary Romans, including children, could have gathered there for informal games, to exercise, or simply to socialize in the sprawling open air. It was a public park on a monumental scale, a deliberate civic investment in leisure and community. This architectural intent is even more starkly visible in the ball courts of Mesoamerica. These were not casual pitches, they were highly formalized ritual spaces, often shaped like a capital I, with towering, sloped walls and stone rings mounted high on the sides. The game played here was a matter of life, death, and cosmic order, but the court itself, with its precise dimensions and acoustics, stands as a testament to a culture that elevated physical skill to a sacred art. Even simpler structures hint at this evolution. The wide, stepped platforms found in cities of the Indus Valley, perhaps used for public ceremonies, would have made perfect impromptu stages for children. Their flat surfaces and tiers were ideal for sitting, chatting, or inventing games that tumbled from one level to the next. This movement from the random courtyard to the purpose-built complex marks a pivotal moment in human history. It shows a dawning, collective understanding that play was not just a random outburst of youthful energy. It was a fundamental force worthy of its own dedicated space, a force that could build stronger bodies, tighter communities, and even connect humanity to the gods. A simple clay soldier is a concentrated piece of history. The toys a civilization leaves behind are far more than objects of fun. They are profound cultural artifacts, a direct reflection of a society's deepest values, its technological prowess, and even its unspoken anxieties. When archaeologists uncover a trove of miniature weapons, chariots, and armored soldiers, they are looking at the clear imprint of a militaristic culture. In ancient Assyria or Rome, such toys were not just for amusement. They were subtle instruments of socialization, preparing boys for a life where military service and expansion were central to their identity. The message was clear and constant. Glory was found in battle, and play was the first step on that path. Conversely, the elaborate dollhouses and detailed domestic sets from the Roman era tell a different story. These miniature homes, complete with tiny furniture and utensils, reflect a society that prized domestic order, wealth, and the display of social status within the private sphere. A child arranging furniture in a model villa was learning the importance of household management and the visible trappings of a successful Roman life. The very sophistication of a toy can reveal a civilization's technological ceiling. The intricate automata and mechanical wonders of the Hellenistic period, such as a miniature theater with moving parts powered by steam or gears, were not just clever diversions. They were stunning demonstrations of advanced engineering knowledge, proof that complex scientific principles were being applied even to the realm of play. The spiritual beliefs of a culture are often embedded most deeply in its games. The Egyptian obsession with the afterlife is perfectly preserved in the board game of Senet. This was not a simple race to the finish. Its squares represented the soul's perilous journey through the underworld, a direct expression of a civilization wholly preoccupied with mortality and the divine. Even the raw materials of a toy speak volumes. A doll carved from common clay versus one cast in bronze does more than indicate a price tag. It maps the social hierarchy, showing the stark divide between the commoner and the elite. The presence of imported materials like ivory or lapis lazuli in a child's grave quietly traces the extensive trade networks that connected distant empires. By studying these objects archaeologically, we gain access to intimate details that grand temples and official chronicles often ignore. The prevalence of certain toys can illuminate rigid gender roles, with warrior figurines for boys and nurturing dolls for girls. The economic conditions of a society are visible in the abundance or scarcity of playthings and in the quality of their craftsmanship. Each toy, from the humblest rag doll to the most elaborate model, is a tiny, three-dimensional snapshot of the world that created it. They offer a perspective on daily life and cultural priorities that is often more honest and more human than any monument built to celebrate a king's glory. These playful activities were a civilization's most vital investment in its own future. Every time a child stacked a set of blocks, they were doing far more than simply balancing shapes. They were conducting an unconscious experiment in physics, learning about weight distribution, structural stability, and spatial relationships. The act of carefully molding a figure from wet clay was a masterclass in fine motor control, training the tiny muscles in the hands and fingers with a precision that would later be essential for writing, crafting tools, or performing surgery. This was hands-on engineering and artistry disguised as fun. The board games we have encountered, from Senet to the royal game of were not just about passing the time. They were sophisticated trainers for the mind. A child leaning over a game board was learning to think several moves ahead, to calculate risks based on the roll of the dice, and to develop a strategy while adapting to the unpredictable actions of their opponent. This cultivated patience, foresight, and a fundamental respect for rules and structure, the very bedrock of a functioning society. Perhaps the most profound cognitive development happened through imitative play. When a little girl cradled her doll, she was not just holding a toy. She was practicing empathy, stepping into the role of a caregiver and understanding on a basic level the needs of another. A boy marshalling his clay soldiers was engaging in a complex narrative, exploring concepts of leadership, conflict, and consequence. This role-playing was the ancient equivalent of a social simulator, allowing children to safely test out different identities and emotional responses. The social lessons continued in the physical realm. Team games and physical contests, whether a simple race or a mock battle, were laboratories for human interaction. They taught children how to cooperate with others to achieve a common goal, how to handle the sting of competition with grace, and how to resolve the inevitable disputes that arise when passionate individuals clash. These were not extracurricular activities, they were the core curriculum for becoming a functional member of a community, and all of this was woven together by the thread of storytelling. The dramatic reenactments of myths and the imaginative scenarios invented during play were powerful engines for language development. Children crafted narratives, built vocabulary, and learned the art of persuasive communication, all within the safe container of a game. The brilliance of this entire system was its foundation in pure, intrinsic joy. No ancient teacher had to force a child to find motivation. The desire to play, to create, and to belong was motivation enough. Long before the first schoolhouse was ever built, the playground served as the original classroom. It was here, in the dusty courtyards and quiet corners of the ancient world, that children willingly and joyfully constructed the cognitive and social frameworks that would carry their civilization forward. The same dice that clattered on a stone board 4,000 years ago still tumble across our tables today. The legacy of ancient play is not a forgotten relic. It is a living, breathing part of our modern world, with direct lineages connecting a child in the 21st century to one in a Sumerian courtyard. We can see this unbroken chain in the simplest of games. The knucklebones or astragaloi tossed by Greek children are the direct ancestors of the modern game of jacks. The strategy and chance mechanics of the royal game of with its winding path and tetrahedral dice, are echoed in the rulebooks of countless contemporary board games. Even the exhilarating act of flying a kite, a staple of sunny afternoons, traces its origin back to the brilliant inventors of Han Dynasty China. These are not mere similarities. They are a cultural inheritance passed down through an unbroken chain of generations. More profound than any single game, however, are the enduring principles of play itself. The core impulses that guided ancient childhood are the very same ones that fuel development today. Imitation remains the primary engine of learning. A modern child piloting a toy spaceship is engaging in the exact same imaginative rehearsal as a Roman child commanding a clay legionary. The human need to create and follow rules, so evident in the precise grids of Senet and Patoli, is the foundation of every structured game from checkers to complex video games. Physical challenge, whether in a formal palestra or on a neighborhood soccer field, continues to build strong bodies and teach resilience. And storytelling, the magical act of weaving narratives around dolls or action figures, is as vital now as it was when children reenacted the adventures of Thor or Heracles. Our modern action figures are the direct descendants of Mesopotamian warrior figurines. Elaborate dollhouses are the spiritual successors to Roman domestic models. The materials have changed from terracotta to plastic, but the fundamental human urges they serve have not. This incredible continuity reveals a powerful truth. While our technology and societies have transformed beyond recognition, the fundamental human needs for play, imagination, and social connection are immutable. They are wired into our very being. When we watch a child today, we are seeing a reflection of every child who came before. The playgrounds of the digital age, with their virtual worlds and complex rule sets, are simply the latest layer built upon a foundation laid thousands of years ago. They are new arenas for the oldest games, new stages for the most ancient stories. This creates an unbroken chain of imaginative expression, a conversation across the millennia where the laughter of a child in the past still resonates in the joy of a child in the present. A child's toy might not be a toy at all. This is the central puzzle facing archaeologists who study ancient play. That beautifully carved animal figurine could have been a sacred offering, not a cherished plaything. A collection of smooth, round stones might be the remains of a thrilling game of marbles, or they could simply be the byproduct of hours spent grinding grain. The evidence is often ambiguous, and the biggest mistake we can make is to view it through a modern lens. We see a small object and instinctively label it a toy, but the people of the past may have seen a ritual object, a teaching tool, or a piece of decorative art. The silence of the archaeological record can be just as misleading. If we find a child's grave with no playthings, does that mean they had a joyless childhood? Not necessarily. It is far more likely their favorite toys were made of wood, cloth, or leather, materials that decayed into dust centuries ago. Our entire perspective is skewed by preservation. We know an immense amount about the children of Egyptian pharaohs or Roman aristocrats because their tombs were filled with durable, expensive goods. But what of the farmer's daughter? Her rag doll and stick and hoop game are lost to us, rendering her childhood nearly invisible. This creates a significant gap in our understanding, a history of play that is overwhelmingly urban and elite. We must also be cautious about the stories we tell based on the objects we find. The common assumption that dolls were always for girls and weapons for boys is a dangerous oversimplification. A girl might have inherited her brother's wooden sword, or a boy might have cherished a small figurine. These rigid categories can blind us to the fluid and individual nature of childhood itself. To navigate this minefield of interpretation, archaeologists act like detectives. They do not look at a single object in isolation. They study its context. Was this small cart found in a domestic space, nestled among cooking pots, or was it placed in a temple crypt? They analyze microscopic wear patterns. Does the object show the kind of scuffs and scratches consistent with daily handling by small, careless hands? They look for associated artifacts. Are there gaming pieces nearby or tools for making more toys? Finally, they turn to comparative ethnography, studying how children in traditional societies use similar objects today. This multi-pronged approach builds a plausible, though never certain, picture. The unavoidable truth is that we are building a mosaic with most of the tiles missing. We can piece together the broad outlines of ancient childhood, but the intimate details, the specific rules of a game, the sound of a particular lullaby, the secret name a child gave to their favorite doll, are gone forever. This is not a failure of scholarship. It is a humble acknowledgement of the beautiful, enduring mystery at the heart of this quest. The inner world of a child from a lost civilization remains a sacred space we can approach but never fully enter. The simple turn of a wheel on a clay cart was a child's first lesson in physics. Long before the age of plastic and microchips, ancient artisans were masters of mechanical wonder, crafting toys with moving parts that captivated young minds. In the Indus Valley, the invention of the toy cart with solid, freely rotating wheels was nothing short of revolutionary. This was not a static model. It was a vehicle a child could actually push, watching as the axle turned and the wheels carried their miniature load. This simple mechanism demonstrated a sophisticated, practical understanding of rotational force and friction, translating a complex technological principle into a tangible experience of pure delight. The engineering ambition soared even higher in Hellenistic Greece, where brilliant minds created automata. These were intricate mechanical figures, often powered by steam, water, or hidden counterweights, designed to perform astonishing actions. A miniature theater might present an entire mythological scene with moving figures, or a bird might appear to drink from a cup. These were not just toys. They were demonstrations of advanced scientific knowledge. breathtaking feats of engineering whose primary purpose was to inspire awe and wonder in the viewer, whether child or adult. The fascination with movement was universal. Egyptian tombs have yielded pull-along toys with articulating parts, such as a wooden crocodile whose jaws would snap open and shut as it was dragged across a smooth stone floor. Each click of its jaw was a lesson in cause and effect, a satisfying mechanical response to a child's own action. Even the simplest sound-making toys relied on a deep, intuitive grasp of principles. A terracotta rattle's internal cavity was carefully calculated to hold just the right amount of pebbles to create a specific sound when shaken. A whistle's air channel was precision drilled to produce a clear, sharp note, a marvel of ancient acoustics. What makes these objects truly extraordinary is that they were not mass-produced. Each one was a unique creation, painstakingly shaped by a skilled artisan's hands, often for a specific child. This investment of time and resources into objects of pure delight reveals a profound cultural insight. These civilizations understood that stimulating a child's curiosity was worth the effort of a master craftsperson. The urge to blend technology with imagination, to build a machine whose only purpose is joy, is not a modern impulse. It is a thread that connects the engineer and the child across thousands of years, a shared language of wonder spoken through the turning of a wheel and the sound of a whistle. A stick lying in the dirt held more potential than any manufactured toy. Before the first clay cart was ever shaped, a child's playground was the entire untamed earth. A riverbank was not just a geographical feature, it was a shipyard for launching tiny fleets of leaf boats, a laboratory for skipping stones, and a frontier for epic adventures. A dense grove of trees became an enchanted kingdom teeming with hidden dangers and magical creatures, its boundaries defined only by the limits of a child's courage. This raw, unstructured interaction with nature was the true cradle of imagination. There were no instruction manuals for turning a gourd into a canteen or a handful of pebbles into a flock of sheep. The child had to invent the rules, assign the roles, and solve the problems that arose. If a fort made of branches collapsed, they learned about structural integrity. If they needed to cross a small stream, they discovered the principles of balance and leverage. This constant, self-directed experimentation was a masterclass in resilience and independent thought. The natural world provided an endless, open-ended toolkit. A smooth, flat stone could be a stepping stone in a game, a plate for a mud pie feast, or a canvas for a temporary drawing. A feather found on the ground might become a quill, a headdress ornament, or a message from the spirit world. This boundless resourcefulness points to a universal childhood truth. The most sophisticated toy ever created is one that can become anything, and nothing is more versatile than a simple stick. It could be a spear for hunting imaginary game, a royal scepter for commanding an army of shadows, or a stylus for tracing letters in the sand. While the archaeological record is filled with the durable, crafted toys of the elite, these objects represent only a tiny fraction of ancient play. The vast, silent majority of childhood hours were spent in this informal, nature-based realm, a world built from mud, leaves, and running water that has left almost no physical trace. This is not a story of poverty or lack, but one of profound richness. It reminds us that the essential ingredients for a vibrant childhood are not complex or expensive. They are time, freedom, and access to a world that has not been entirely tamed. The legacy of this natural play is a quiet challenge to our modern world, a testament to the enduring power of the human mind to find infinite wonder in a handful of dirt and a sunlit afternoon. That timeless curriculum of play is a bridge across 4,000 years. We have wandered through the echoing courtyards of Mohenjo-Daro and stood beside the Senate boards of Egypt, discovering a single profound truth. The laughter of a child pushing a clay cart and the focused silence of another moving a game piece are not relics. They are the living heart of human history. These children, though their names are lost to us, were not so different from any child today. They learned their place in the world by mimicking the adults around them. They forged friendships through games of chance and physical skill. They soothed their fears and celebrated their joys by acting out the grand myths of their culture. Their imagination was the silent, powerful engine that carried entire civilizations forward. This journey challenges us to see the past not as a series of dusty ruins and forgotten kings, but as a continuous human story. It is a story written not only in stone and scripture, but in the worn smoothness of a stone step and the careful craftsmanship of a wooden doll. The imaginative spirit of the child is the constant, the invisible thread that connects us to every human who has ever lived. In our own time, with its structured schedules and digital distractions, this ancient legacy is a vital reminder. It calls us to protect the simple, unstructured freedom that allows a child to turn a stick into a sword and a blanket into a castle. It asks us to remember that creativity is not a luxury, but a fundamental human need, as essential to our development now as it was on the banks of the Indus River. We are the temporary guardians of this unbroken chain of imagination. If this glimpse into the world of ancient childhood has resonated with you, we invite you to join us for more explorations into the mysteries of our shared past. And we would love to hear from you. What did play mean in your own childhood? What simple objects or games sparked your imagination? Share your stories in the comments below and become part of this ongoing conversation across the